Thank you so much for joining us at the 2019 ACPA Presidential Symposium, commemorating the 70th anniversary of the Student Personnel Point of View, which was from 1949 through a racial and social justice lens. I'm Jamie Washington, and I have the pleasure of the honor of serving as the president of ACPA for the 2018 and 19 year. We're excited to be in this space with each of you and to be joined by so many of you live stream this afternoon and this morning, depending upon where you are in the country. Okay, we want to start just kind of giving you a sense of what our intentions and our flow is for this afternoon. And so we will start with our land acknowledgement, an appreciation, the focus of the symposium and how we got here, talking about our intentions for the day, and then how we will flow in our time together with both of us, those of us in the room and those of us who are joining us virtually. With that named, ACPA, College Student Educators International, comprehensive student affairs organization that advances higher education and engages students for the lifetime of learning and discovery. Although serving an international audience, our membership is primarily from the United States, and our offices are headquartered in Washington, D.C. at the National Center for Higher Education. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through generations and dissemination of knowledge, ACPA acknowledges the painful history of genocide in the United States for Native, Aboriginal, and Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect the many diverse tribal nations and peoples who were forcibly removed from, as well as those who are still connected to this land. We particularly acknowledge and recognize the land upon which our international headquarters is located today, as long served as the site of the meetings and exchanges of many indigenous people. ACPA strongly advocates for higher education institutions and student affairs professionals to honor the land that you occupy, to honor original tribal occupants and the history of the place where you are located. Further, we have responsibility to continually self-educate, reflect, listen to the histories of the people of our areas, including tribal acknowledgments in the practice and understanding and acknowledging history. We thank you for joining us today. We acknowledge all that made it possible for us to be here. We want to give a particular thanks to our host here, Dr. Candace Moore, and the staff at the Center for Diversity and Inclusion in Higher Education at the University of Maryland, College Park. We want to thank the staff of the International Office at ACPA, and all of you who are in the room and joining us. We thank our technical partners who are joining us as well, and you should have information about how, in fact, you can check in and send us questions as we move through our time together. So let me start with our intentions for the day. As we commemorate the 70th anniversary of the 1949 update to the Student Personnel Point of View, I want to first acknowledge Dr. Susan Komovis for reminding me that this was the case. So she gave me a call or dropped an email to me last summer sometime, as Susan would do, and reminded us of this anniversary. I thought, what a great opportunity for us to engage as a profession, and particularly as an association, this seminal document at this time. ACPA has embarked on a strategic imperative for racial justice, and decolonization. And it felt important to me for us to look at the document in the context of racial and social justice. So that's how we came to this topic today. It is our hope to create a space for a robust engagement of this document for the student affairs profession through a racial and social justice lens. We want to consider the contextual time in which the document was written, who the people were, what were the questions that were asked, and what those things meant at the time. And we want to use this experience to embrace and celebrate the brilliance of the writers at that time and lay that alongside of the brilliance of the folks who are in this panel who are preparing us as we continue to do the work of the profession for the next generation. With that named, I will share a little bit about the context of the document. The American College Council on Education's conference on the student personnel work met in April of 1937 to investigate certain fundamental principles related to the clarification of the so-called personnel work. At the core of the final report of the conference, a student personnel point of view was called to consolidate all coordination of student personnel work and to place the authority to do so under the auspices of a single association, the American Council on Education. The 1937 student personnel point of view, philosophy of considering the student as a whole intellectual, whole person, including intellectual capacity, achievement, emotional makeup, physical condition, social relations, vocational aptitude and skills, moral and religious values, economic resources, and aesthetic appreciation puts emphasis on the development of the person rather than on intellectual training alone. So with that named, folks, I just want to invite us to pay attention to the beginning of the work. It was then revisited, and I want us to talk about, and we will consider today, what it meant for it to be revisited some 12 years later and what was going on in that time. But I wanted to start with the beginning because, again, we are here to focus because of the commemoration of the 70th anniversary, and we do recognize that that anniversary was built on a document that came before it. So who were the original writers? As we consider that, as I was doing my preparation for my comments to set us off, I recognized that for many of us, we might be surprised to find out that these folks were not necessarily student affairs professionals, but student personnel practitioners. And how we begin to understand the distinction between professionals and practitioners, as I make sense of it, is that there were not at that point at the same level as we have today the preparation to do the work, the professional programs that prepared folks to do the work. So with that named, the folks who came together for the experience demographically were largely, as we think about them, they were largely male, cis male, as far as we know, and only 2 cis women. Most of them in the group were fairly young. 12 of the group of 19 in the original group were in their 40s or 50s. One was Dr. Shook's assistant, and she was 28. Esther Lloyd Jones and Gilbert Wren, who are most known for us in ACPA, were in their mid-30s at the time. And so some of you in the room might feel very much connected to the writings and the scholarships that you're doing right now in your mid-30s and how important it is for the profession. The senior members of the team were Edward C. Elliott at the age of 61 and H.E. Hawks at 66. As you consider who wrote the document, we invite you into some questions around why it is important to consider the context of what the lens that they looked through and what they then proposed. I want to offer that as I was reviewing, I was not able to get information on much more than age and gender. And so we get to think about what that means for us as we consider the whole person in our work today. The 1949 authors were some of the original authors, but not all of them. And so we invite you to consider who these folks were and the roles that they played as they contributed to the update of this work in 1949. As we move into our panelists today, I want to just say the final things about the update. To reflect the social changes of the emerging role of higher education, a new cultural requirement growing out of World War II. So fuller realization of the democracy of every phase of living, expansion of programs for international understanding and cooperation, application of creative thinking and solutions to social problems were very important, and administration of public affairs. Student services workers also, it was important to become involved with the development of the whole student that continued, interacting in social settings, treating each student as individuals, and students were responsible to participate in their development rather than passive recipients. Given this, we want to focus today, our panelists, to consider big elements of the 1949 document. It invited us to consider the philosophy and the objectives of the student personnel point of view. It invited us to consider the needs for student personnel services. What did that mean and what did that look like? Invited us to consider the elements of a student affairs program or student personnel program, to consider the administration of student personnel work, and the importance of a research emphasis. With that, we've invited this wonderful group of partners and leaders in the field to join us in some questions, to shed some light and to invite us to engage the important question of the work today through a racial justice and social justice lens. It is not our intention today to necessarily solve all of the world's problems. We won't get it all finished or figure it all out as it relates to student affairs, but it is intended for us to consider a strategic and intentional look at how we do our work today and to better develop on the promise of higher and post-secondary education and tertiary education. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Dr. Penny Rue, 2018-19 board chair of the National Association of Student Personnel Workers and vice president of Student Affairs at Wake Forest University. Dr. Roger Worthington is part of our host and has served as the executive director of the center and is now professor in higher education and counseling here at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Cristobal Salinas is a founding editor of the journal committed to social change on race and ethnicity through NCORE, the National Center, the National Association for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in Higher Education, and is the assistant professor of the Department of Educational Leadership and Research Methodology. Dr. Julie Park is the associate professor in the Department of the Counseling and Higher Education and Special Education here at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Lori Patton Davis is the 2018 president of the American Association of the Study of Higher Education and professor at the Indiana Universities and Indiana IUPUI. And then Dr. Arthur Dean is a former board member for the National Association of Senior Diversity Officers. Today, in-house, we will have an opportunity to hear each of our panelists. They will come and share their thoughts for about 12 to 15 minutes, and we'll have about 3 of them will go, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers, which we will invite you to consider at that space. We will engage the responses from the panelists in that space, and then we'll have a little bit of a break. We'll come back together and hear the next group of panelists, and once we have heard those panelists, we will have an opportunity for you to engage again, and then we'll take a full question and answer period that will take us to the end of our time together.